The weapons were gone in 11 minutes. This was the Vareth Suppression Fleet's primary objective, and it was achieved with precision that the fleet's commander, Director Sethketh, would later describe to his superiors as textbook. 11 minutes from engagement initiation to complete weapons neutralization for the entire human defensive position at Kareth Station. Primary batteries destroyed. Secondary batteries destroyed. Torpedo launchers destroyed. Point defense arrays destroyed. Emergency weapons stores destroyed. The suppression fleet had done its job. Director Sethketh transmitted the confirmation at 811. All human weapons systems at Kareth. Station confirmed neutralized. Position is disarmed. He transmitted this and waited for the boarding authorization. He waited for 6 minutes. At 0817, he transmitted again, weapons neutralization confirmed, requesting boarding authorization. At 0819, the boarding authorization was granted. He ordered the boarding fleet forward. The boarding fleet moved to within 2 kilometers of Kareth Station and stopped. It stopped because at 0819, exactly as the boarding fleet crossed the 2-kilometer threshold, 42 things happened simultaneously on the station's exterior. None of them were weapons. Sethketh watched his tactical display and processed what 42 simultaneous things that were not weapons looked like in an engagement context. It looked, he would later report, like a problem he had not anticipated. Kareth Station was a concordance transit hub. Population at the time of the engagement, 411, civilian and military mix. The military contingent ran the station's defense systems. The civilian contingent ran everything else. Everything else included the station's engineering systems, its life support, its docking infrastructure, its communications array, its cargo handling, its power distribution, and the 17 kilometers of conduit that connected all of these things to each other in the specific way that a functioning space station required. The suppression fleet's weapons neutralization had been precise and comprehensive. It had neutralized every system that the station's specifications listed under defensive armament. The station's specifications did not list the engineering systems under defensive armament. The engineering systems were not weapons. They were also, as Director Sethketh was discovering R19, not nothing. The 42 simultaneous things were 6 docking clamps on the station's primary bay extended to their maximum reach position, which happened to be directly in the path of the boarding fleet's approach vector. 14 external atmosphere venting ports opened, producing a thrust differential that began rotating the station on its axis at a rate that was technically within normal operational parameters, and that was directly into the boarding fleet's approach geometry. 8 exterior maintenance drones, which were listed in the station's specifications as non-operational, activated and began moving along the station's hull in patterns that the suppression fleet's tactical AI flagged as inconsistent with maintenance activity. For cargo transfer arms extended from the station's cargo bay and oriented themselves perpendicular to the boarding fleet's approach. 3 communications array components reconfigured to produce an electromagnetic emission pattern that the suppression fleet's communication systems had not encountered before and which the tactical AI was currently analyzing. 7 airlocks cycled. Sethketh watched all 42 things happen simultaneously and then transmitted to his boarding fleet hold position. His boarding fleet held. He said to his tactical officer, "What is this?" His tactical officer said, "The station is reconfiguring its non-weapon systems." He said, "To what end?" His tactical officer said, "Unknown, sir." He paused. "None of these systems are weapons by specification." He said, "Are they weapons by application?" His tactical officer was quiet for a moment. He said, The docking clamps are in our approach path. At maximum extension, an approach vector that passes within 40 meters of the clamp endpoints risks contact. Paused. The station rotation is putting us outside our optimal boarding geometry. He paused. The maintenance drone's current positions on the hull are at every exterior access point that our boarding plan identified as primary entry locations. He paused. The cargo arms are. He paused again. They appear to be positioned to intercept the boarding vector between our ships and the secondary entry points. Sethketh said, "They're blocking the entrances." His tactical officer said, "With non-weapon systems, sir." "Yes," he said. "Can we fire on them?" His tactical officer pulled up the rules of engagement. He said, "The rules of engagement authorize engagement of weapon systems and active threats." He paused. The docking clamps, the cargo arms, and the maintenance drones are not weapon systems. He paused. The venting ports are life support infrastructure. He paused. The electromagnetic emissions are from the communications array. He said, "None of them are weapons." He said, "None of them are classified as weapons, sir." He said, "Are they stopping the boarding operation?" His tactical officer said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Then what are they?" His tactical officer said, "Obstacles, sir. Non-weapons obstacles." He looked at his display. The station was rotating slowly. The docking clamps were extended. The maintenance drones were positioned at every entry point his plan had identified. The cargo arms were across the secondary approach. His boarding fleet had authorization to engage weapon systems. His boarding fleet did not have authorization to destroy a station's life support infrastructure and cargo handling systems. His boarding fleet did not, technically, have authorization to destroy maintenance drones that were technically non-operational equipment that happened to be positioned at entry points. He said, "Who is doing this?" His tactical officer checked the communication traffic. He said, "The station's engineering section." He paused. Led by a civilian, he paused. Chief Engineer Marcus Asayadeimi. He said, "He's not military." His tactical officer said, "No, sir. He's listed as civilian infrastructure." He paused. He is also, apparently, very familiar with what each of the station's non-weapon systems can do in an unconventional application. Sethketh looked at the display. He had a disarmed station. A station with no weapons. A station that his fleet had neutralized in 11 minutes with the textbook precision he was proud of. A station that was blocking his boarding fleet with its garbage handling systems. Inside Korath Station, Chief Engineer Marcus Asayadeimi was standing in the engineering control center with 11 of his staff and approximately the same amount of coffee that the situation warranted, which was a lot. He had been running his section of the station for 6 years. In those 6 years, he had developed the specific and comprehensive knowledge of a man who had fixed everything that could break on Korath Station at least once. Usually at 0300 during a shift when the replacement parts were 2 weeks out and the manual solution was whatever. He could build from what was in front of him. He knew what every system on the station could do. He also knew what every system could be made to do. When the weapons neutralization had begun at 0800, he had made a decision. The decision was not complex. It did not require strategic training or military doctrine or the kind of analysis that the station's military contingent had been doing since the suppression fleet appeared. It required the knowledge of a man who had spent 6 years inside a station's systems and who understood what each system was and what each system was for and what each system could become in an emergency. He had spent 3 minutes writing a list. The list was what the station had, organized by what it could do in an unconventional application. The docking clamps were designed to hold vessels. They could also obstruct paths. The venting ports were designed for atmosphere management. They could also produce rotation. The maintenance drones were listed as non-operational. They were not non-operational. They were on a maintenance cycle that the station's documentation listed as non-operational because the documentation had been written by someone who understood the maintenance cycle differently than a Seidaimi did. They were available. The cargo arms were designed to transfer cargo. They could also fill an approach vector. The communications array was designed to communicate. It could also produce interference patterns in specific frequencies if you reconfigured it in ways that the specifications manual described as inadvisable and that were, in his experience, more useful than the manual suggested. None of these were weapons. All of them were what he had. He had organized his 11 staff around the list, and they had executed it in the time between weapons. Neutralization and boarding authorization. Now, he was watching the boarding fleet hold position, and he was thinking about what came next. His deputy, a young engineer named Yunwei Vasquez, said, "They'll find a way through eventually," he said. "Yes." She said, "What do we do when they do?" He said, "The same thing we've been doing." He looked at the list. "We find out what we have. We figure out what it can do. We do the next thing." She said, "What's the next thing?" He said, "I'm working on it." Paused. "What's the current position of the boarding fleet?" She said, "Holding at 2 kilometers, not moving." He said, "They're trying to figure out what we are." She said, "What are we?" He said, "People with a station and a list." He paused. "That's been enough so far." At 0851, Sethketh opened a channel to the station. He had spent 32 minutes with his tactical staff and his rules of engagement and his boarding fleet's approach analysis, and had arrived at an assessment. The assessment was, the station had made his boarding plan inoperable without using any weapons, which meant his rules of engagement gave him limited authorization for the actions that would clear the obstacles, which meant clearing the obstacles required either a rules of engagement expansion that required authorization from his command authority or a different approach. He had sent a request for the rules of engagement expansion. While waiting, he opened the channel. He said, "Karath Station, this is Director Sethketh of the Verith Suppression Fleet. I'd like to speak with whoever is currently in charge of whatever is happening on your exterior." A voice came back. It was calm. It had the calm of someone who had been working a difficult problem for 30 minutes and had found a rhythm. It said, "Director, this is Chief Engineer Seidaimi. What can I do for you?" He said, "You can explain what you're doing." The voice said, "I'm maintaining station systems." He paused. The docking clamps are in their extended inspection position, which is a routine maintenance configuration. The venting ports are managing an atmospheric differential that developed during your engagement, which is a life support response. The maintenance drones are conducting exterior inspections, which is a scheduled maintenance activity. The cargo arms are in transfer-ready position for an inbound cargo that was scheduled before your fleet arrived. The communications array is experiencing some unusual atmospheric interference that I'm working to address. Sethketh said, "None of that is true." The voice said, "It's all technically accurate." He paused. "Whether it's the complete explanation is a different question." Sethketh said, "Mr. Seidaimi, your station's weapons have been neutralized. My fleet has boarding authorization. I understand what you're doing and why." Paused. "I'm asking you directly to stand down the non-standard configurations." The voice said, "Director, I'm a civilian engineer. You've neutralized every weapon system on this station." He paused. "I'm operating station infrastructure in configurations that are within operational parameters." He paused. "If you'd like to discuss the specific configurations, I'd be happy to walk you through the technical justification for each one." He said, "The technical justifications are not the issue." The voice said, "I understand that." He paused, "But they are what I have." A pause. He said, "You're going to make this difficult until your fleet reinforcement arrives." The voice said, "I'm going to maintain station systems in the configurations that seem appropriate until circumstances change." He paused. "Whether fleet reinforcement constitutes a change in circumstances is a question I can't answer yet." He said, "Do you know when reinforcement arrives?" The voice said, "I know when it was requested." "I don't know when it arrives." He paused. "Neither do you." He said, "You're stalling." The voice said, "I'm maintaining station infrastructure." He paused. "What you call it depends on your perspective." He said, "If I get expanded engagement authorization, I can remove the obstacles by force." The voice said, "Yes." He paused. "That would require firing on life support infrastructure, cargo handling systems, and maintenance equipment." Paused. "I imagine your command authority is thinking about that decision carefully." He said, "You know they are." The voice said, "I would be in their position." He paused. "That decision has a record attached to it. A fleet that fires on civilian life support infrastructure to clear an approach vector for a boarding operation is a fleet that has to explain that record." He was quiet. The voice said, "Director, I want to be honest with you. I'm an engineer. I have 11 people and a list of station systems. I can do this for approximately 4 more hours before the configurations start to require maintenance that I can't perform while also maintaining the configurations." He paused. "After 4 hours, my options get more limited," he said. "For hours." The voice said, "Give or take." Paused. "What I can tell you is that in those 4 hours, your command authority is going to be deciding whether to authorize action against civilian infrastructure. And that decision has implications that extend beyond this station." He paused. "I can't know what they'll decide." He paused. "But I can make the time available for them to decide carefully." Sethketh looked at his tactical display. He looked at the docking clamps, and the maintenance drones and the cargo arms, and the rotating station. He looked at his boarding fleet, holding position, waiting. He said, "You've bought yourself time." The voice said, "I've maintained station systems in unconventional configurations." He paused. "The time is a side effect." He paused. "I'm an engineer. This is what I know how to do." He said, "It's more than that." The voice said, "Maybe." He paused. "I've got a list and I've been working through it." He paused. "That's the honest answer." A long pause. Sethketh said, "Mr. Aseadeimi, when this is over, however it ends, I wonder that I filed a report this morning saying the position was disarmed." The voice said, "We are disarmed." He paused. "We don't have any weapons." He said, "I know." The voice said, "The list is what we have instead." He looked at the tactical display one more time. He said, "It's been sufficient." The voice said, "So far." He paused. "Ask me again in 4 hours." The channel held. Concordance reinforcement arrived in 3 hours and 47 minutes. The station was never boarded. The chief engineer's after-action report was 7 pages and was entirely technical. It listed every system that had been reconfigured, the operational justification for each configuration, and the maintenance required to return them to standard settings. It did not describe what it had accomplished. It did not need to. The station was still there,